Everything is either a call for love or an expression of love. And the great thing is, when someone expresses love to you, you express love back. When someone is calling for love, aka attacking you, yelling at you, judging you, blaming you, undermining you, whatever that is, the appropriate response to a call for love is to love. And it's a powerful reframing, because our natural tendency is to attack back. And I often have to remind myself, okay, just let's pause for a moment. Let's just stop. Let me not play out thousands of years of human history where we just attack each other ad infinitum. But let me just pause for a moment and realize, oh, this is a call for love on their part. So let me respond with love. And remember, that's not saying you're a doormat or letting things, not condoning negative actions. It's loving here.
Hi, I'm Carol Saunders, host of the Spiritual Forum, where I have extraordinary conversations exploring the vast realms of spiritual living. If you're on a healing, learning, awakening, or inner transformational journey, this podcast will support you. The personal stories, wisdom, and insight shared here will inspire you and give you hope. Step into your divine nature and welcome to the forum. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Spiritual Forum. My guest today is Adam Rizvi, and we're going to be talking about death and dying and spirituality and love and forgiveness and all those good things that touch our lives. Adam's a critical care physician and neurointensivist whose frontline work in America's ICUs and decades of contemplative study converge in his book, which is titled Love Does Not Know Death. And it's a luminous guide to meeting mortality without fear. Drawing on hundreds of bedside encounters and the non-dual principles of A Course in Miracles, he translates insight into practical tools, especially the discipline of true forgiveness. And this helps patients, families, and clinicians face loss with courage, clarity, and compassion. He leads hospital teams, teaches workshops on awakening and end-of-life care, and he co-hosts the podcast Letters to the Sky. Welcome, Adam.
Thank you, Reverend Carol. It's a joy and a pleasure to be with you.
I'm so excited to hear. I know some people feel like death is way far from them, but I have learned that it could be any moment. It could be any moment. And so to be really mindful of this topic, death, dying, disease, spirituality, forgiveness, it's all the stuff that we're really, it's up for all of us. So before we go into your story, I've got just a few quick questions to ask you to let us get to know you a little bit better. Let's just start with, what's your favorite place on earth?
I've never been asked that. What is my favorite place on earth? There's a quote in Meditations by Marcus Aurelius where he says, people feel like their happiness will get greater if they go someplace special, but they don't realize the one common denominator is you, wherever you go. And so I've found that I've had terrible days in the Alps in France because something else was going on inside and I was just feeling crummy. And I've had amazing days in the dirty streets of Skid Row in LA, and it all depends on what your state of mind is. So I would say my favorite place on earth is wherever I am, as long as I feel peaceful inside.
That's wonderful. That's a really good spiritual message. That's something for all of us to take to heart. Okay, so if you were in an elevator and had to succinctly express your message, what would you tell someone was your message to the world?
I would say my message is, don't wait to forgive. Don't wait to love.
Another
That's the
spiritual
message.
lesson. Yeah,
Yeah.
really good. Yeah. I'm feeling the same way. Like I said, anything could happen at any moment. And so
Yeah.
let's live fully and love and completely unburden ourselves. I love that. All right. So now I've got a little bit heavier question.
Those were pretty heavy.
Those were pretty heavy.
Those were, well, the the travel question, maybe, but the
Yeah.
other one, that took me some time to think about.
Yeah, okay. This one should be fast because your book is about it. I'm really curious, how do you define death?
Ah, okay. Gosh. Well,
Or what is death?
yeah. I'll say death is the appearance of an ending. And I say the appearance of because it isn't really an ending. And I think that's sort of the whole point of it. If you look at other aspects of your life, whether it's you're in a marriage and then you get a divorce, that's an ending. That's a death. When you graduate from college or when you change jobs, those are deaths. Those are endings. You could maybe even say death is transition. Death is change. And life is filled with many, many, many deaths, many, many changes. The big death, the death of the physical body, when the physical body stops functioning as we expect it to, I think maybe gets a lot of attention. But the truth is, death is always happening in many different ways throughout life. That's how I
Really
would
a good
define it.
point. Yeah, that's really, really a good point. We go through death and birth cycles through our whole life.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah, we really do. Yeah. Everyone thinks about the big D death at the very, very end,
Right,
but not
right.
all the other ones. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. And even like when your hope for something doesn't happen, there's a little death there, your
yeah.
expectations, your dreams. And usually a closed door opens a door. So it's also a death and also kind of a go through the open door. So
That's right.
um,
If you think about it, Reverend Carol, look at all the so-called deaths and births that we've had in our lives. And whenever a death occurs, there's always a simultaneous birth. There's always a transition to some new chapter. And so why would we think that the death of the physical body would be any different? I think a lot of people are afraid. They say, well, what happens after I die? Will anything happen? I've had some patients say everything that they've been told is that when the body dies, that's it. That's the end of existence. Nothing happens after that. And I- I've had enough experiences with my patients and just personal experiences to suggest otherwise. We'll put it that way. And I think that's one of my messages is that death is just an appearance. Life, in fact, does keep going on and on and on. That's
yeah,
what I would
and
say.
yeah, and there's so many near-death experiences now that are so public. It's really hard to not
Yeah.
pay attention to those and know that consciousness goes beyond the body. So, but you've had so many interesting experiences being by the bedside of people who have died. Before we get into any of those, and I'd love to hear about some of them, let's hear about your spiritual story because you had just a real unique upbringing, and here you are as a doctor, a physician who is in the ICU, who really sits by his patients and is spiritually centered. I think it's just a really rare combination. So, we'd love to hear about how you got there and kind of a little bit of your growing up.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so interesting. I credit well, one, I credit my being a physician to my dad. Um, he really pushed me to do it, and in retrospect, I'm glad he did. Um, my dad grew up or was raised a Muslim. He was born in Karachi, Pakistan, and moved to the States after marrying after marrying my mom. My mom, interestingly, was studying to be a Catholic nun when she met my dad. And I don't think I mentioned that in the
About a
book,
career
but
pivot.
yeah, talk about a pivot there. No, they met in England, in the UK, and they fell in love with each other. Needless to say that the convent wasn't going to be seeing much more of her. So, her and my dad moved to the United States, and I was born in Miami, Florida. The interesting thing about that is both my parents were fairly open-minded because they married each other, but my dad still very much believed in Islam. He sort of uh, continued to embrace that practice, that tradition. In fact, he taught me when I was young how to read the Quran. which is the holy book for Muslims. He taught me how to pray 5 times a day. There's a prayer mat, and there's a whole series of sequence of movements that you do and certain prayers. I learned some basic Arabic, and I would go to the mosque every Friday. My mother was raised Catholic, and she never really let go of that tradition. I grew up feeling a very deep sense of devotion towards Jesus Christ and Mother Mary, and all the saints within the Catholic tradition. In fact, one of my favorite things to do was to read the lives of the saints. Saint Teresa of Avila, her book of life, and then her interior castle, one of my favorite spiritual books in the world. It continues to be. Ignatius of Loyola, many different saints and masters in that tradition continue to inspire me. So I grew up in a very diverse background. Every summer, I would go to either Pakistan or France. Now, in France, my family was Roman Catholic. My grandparents were Roman Catholic, and I'd go to Sunday church and attend mass with them. And I remember my French grandmother once telling me they had met my Pakistani family once long ago when the two families were introducing themselves to each other. And I remember my grandmother, she was cooking. It was right after mass, and she said, "Your Pakistani family, they're so nice. It's just so sad that they have to go to hell."
That's
And
traumatic for a little boy.
I thought, well, wait a minute here. Why are they going to hell? And then so she said, well, they don't believe in Jesus Christ. They don't believe in the Apostles' Creed, and then so I thought, okay, so I have to read the Bible. I have to believe what Christians believe to go to heaven. Okay. All right. Well, let me see if I could talk to my mom about this and talk to my Pakistani family. I was very young. This is like 6 years old, 7 years old, something like that. The next summer, I end up going to Pakistan, steeped in that tradition, even more so than when I'm in the States, praying 5 times a day. We go to mosque every Friday. The whole culture is different, and they have something called the adhan, which is a man who sort of calls to prayer in the morning. It's so beautiful. It's so beautiful. You hear the call. It's sort of like you have some voice from up on high, calling and inviting you to pray to God. I thought it was just symbolically so beautiful. And my grandmother, while we were cooking in the kitchen, she had a stove that was low to the ground and did a lot of the cooking on the ground. In the olden days, all the cooking was done on the ground. So I was sitting on the ground with her, and she was cooking, and she essentially said something to the effect of, I remember your French family. What a sweet, your grandparents are so sweet. It's so unfortunate they're going to have to go to hell. And I was like, wait a minute here. So apparently, either I'm going to the Christian hell or I'm going to the Muslim hell because I don't believe in one or the other. My brain was starting to break apart. And that was my first exposure to cognitive dissonance. And I think it shaped a lot of my life because they can't both be true. And I know my French family, I know my Pakistani family, they're both kind-hearted people. They care for me. They cared for me and my sister growing up. There's no way these kind people are going to be punished for eternity. It just didn't make sense to me. So I grew up deeply wanting to heal that cognitive divide. And I felt there had to be a truth that held all human beings in an embrace of love. There had to be some unconditional love that was the ground of all of reality. And that, I think, was probably one of the biggest reasons I dived deep into the spiritual path at such a young age.
Completely get that. I mean, bless little Adam. That would be really, really a tough journey. So you're doing everything right to do everything right by each family and not find yourself burning eternally. There are so many divisions now, and so I think those of us who have had the experience of having to bridge big divisions like that are real good catalysts for what's going on in the world now, where there's just so many divisions being sown everywhere. And so if you're already kind of used to holding these two paradoxes and knowing that there's something beyond this that contains all of it, and I would call that God or love or source or whatever it is that contains the ground of being, that contains all of it, all of it. There is no real division. But your upbringing, I think, could be really, really helpful, not only in the work you do, but also in helping to bridge the divisions that our world is facing now. And of course, the spiritual path is where it's at, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's any other reason to be alive personally than to dive deeply into the spiritual path. And it could look differently for different people. And I truly feel there are as many paths to God as there are human beings. We're all so unique. We're also uh, preciously idiosyncratic. And it's important for us to respect that there are differences on the path. It doesn't make us less or better than each other. In fact, we should celebrate that. And I love having interfaith conversations. In fact, one of the stories I share in the book, Love Does Not Know Death, is a trip that I took in college to India. I went to Varanasi, or Kashi, the locals call it, and I spoke about religion and globalization at a conference. And here I was surrounded. It was a very interesting moment. Surrounded by mostly Hindus in India talking about the need for interfaith dialogue, having been exposed to Judeo-Christian traditions. And by then I was deeply studying Buddhism and Hinduism. And when you go to the Eastern traditions, there's a whole other way of viewing reality. It's vastly different. They're not theistic in the tradition in the sense that we're used to in the Judeo-Christian traditions, and yet there is a fundamental ground, like we talked about. There's a ground of being that can hold those traditions as well. And I find the exposure of belief systems does that to you. It forces you to say, what can hold all of this? And to this day, I haven't found anything deeper than love that can hold all of this. And Rumi says it so beautifully. He says, "My religion is the religion of love." I think he nailed it.
He did nail it. Yes, and I think you're right. And love is the definition I have for God. It's really interesting when you look at prayers or anytime the word God is used. Just slip in the word love and see how that kind of shifts the feeling of the whole thing. Because love can hold it all. Love can hold all of it. And actually, I've always said that there's many, many, many paths to God. As many people as there are on the planet, many paths to God. But I do believe there's one door, and maybe that door is love. That
That's
we
beautiful.
walk through that door, so we can all get to the top of the mountain in whatever path we do. We take, and some can be long and arduous, and some can be straight up. But there is one door, and we all have to step through that one. And that's the I am, the love, the unconditional love, and that ultimately is something I think we each face to get to the other side, to the allness. But anyway, those are my thoughts. I think they kind of go along with yours. Yeah.
Well, one thing to share is, and this is maybe going a little bit deeper than I intended to, but if you look at for a moment, remember we were talking about endings and deaths. If you look at each ending, every end to a relationship, every change in career, even on a day-to-day basis, the start and end of a thought, or the start and end of an emotion, these things are fleeting. They come and go. And so it sort of begs the question, well, what is there that does not change, that does not end, that doesn't come and go? Now, there's the term eternal, right, which I like because it means outside of time. But you could also use infinite. So what does not change? And there's this really interesting experience that you can do just in observing the coming and going of a thought. What is it that is aware? of the coming and going of a thought. What is it that knows an emotion starts and an emotion ends? There is something in us that does not ever change. And I think that's what death often does, is it brings us to the changeless. And I think it's an invitation to redefining identity, really.
Well, I think that's very thought-provoking. I love that you didn't intend to go so deep, but let's keep going deep. Let's go wherever we can go. I mean, death is where people really kind of hit the wall. I mean, it's like when when you find out that this is your end, if you are in that situation. Some of us aren't. Some of us are taken out by lightning or a car accident or a plane accident or something like that. But if like what you face every day in your ICU kind of work, people are facing that news. And I think for many of us, it really, really forces us to, okay, really, really face it all, face all of it. If we
Yeah.
haven't, then this is uh, I mean, I would call it come to Jesus. I don't mean it to be
Yeah.
Christian, but that's kind of that moment where you really kind of have to come, perhaps, get down on your knees, figuratively speaking. And I'm sure for others, it's just another door that's opening. So can you share some of your experiences with death and dying and the patients in the ICU?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. I had a patient. This was back in Tucson. He was dying of, I forget now exactly what he was dying of. I believe it was some form of cancer or sepsis. I can't recall now, but he was involved in the Manhattan Project. Now, he didn't give me specifics, but um, he played a huge role in a landmark aspect of United States history and world history, really. And he devoted so much of his life to his career. He was a stellar physicist and engineer. He put long, long hours into advancing his career. His wife ended up dying, I think, midway through his career. This was after the Manhattan Project. And he was lying there in bed talking to me, and he says, when I look back over my life, the things that I consider important had nothing to do with my career, had nothing to do with the project that I was on, the efforts that I put into helping our country. Now, there's nothing wrong with that, but for him, it didn't matter. He started to think about the time that he spent with his wife and how he wished he spent more time in the days before her death, and how he didn't spend enough time with his children, and he didn't spend enough time in nature, didn't spend enough time reading books that he loved. And I thought, here is a man that probably got some gold medal, probably a president's medal, who knows? Like this gentleman had a lot of awards, I'm sure, but none of that mattered to him. And that happens so often with death. When people face their death, the things that they were chasing in life in their 20s, 30s, and 40s don't matter anymore. And the things that you push aside, time with family, the kind moments with your children, playing with friends when you're younger, and just spending time with friends when you're older, those come to the forefront. And I wonder, why do we wait till death comes knocking to see that? I think personally, not in a morbid way, but the contemplation of death, really sitting with your own mortality on a daily basis, is so important, because it helps us recognize what really matters. And that's why I said, when you said, how do I summarize my message? I say, don't wait. Don't wait. If there's a grievance that you're holding, what are you waiting for? You could die. Just let that go. And I'll tell you, forgiveness, and I'd love to dive into this deeper. Forgiveness, when I talk about forgiveness, I like to use the word true forgiveness as opposed to regular forgiveness, because here's what regular forgiveness is. Regular forgiveness says, I'm a better man than you. I recognize you've done something wrong. but because I'm a better man, I'm going to let you go. I have not forgotten
It's very
the
haughty.
yeah, it's very haughty, it's very arrogant almost, and
It
it's almost
is.
sort of like
I
a
will
false
bestow this
charity.
upon you.
Yeah, yes, exactly. I will bestow this gift upon you. You may have my forgiveness, and how fortunate you are that I have given this to you. Right? It's sort of like a false charity. Well, true forgiveness recognizes a couple things, and then we should go deep. True forgiveness recognizes one surface level truth. Everything that we do and say, we do because we don't know any better. It's the best thing that we can do with what we know. It's the best thing we can do or say based on our childhood upbringing. We don't know the trauma people have been through, the abuse that they've been through, the trouble, the trials they've gone through. And so sometimes when people behave in a way that hurts us, they may not know any better because of how they've been raised. That's sort of a surface level to help generate some compassion for others. A much deeper level, and this goes into a little bit of non-duality, which maybe some listeners may not have heard of, but non-duality essentially collapses a couple things. It says there is no subject and object. There's just this. There's just the oneness. And then it goes deeper to say the appearance of Reverend Carol and Adam and all these other human beings, 8-9 billion human beings, is just an appearance. There's only one underneath it all. And if you go down into that perspective, that thing that person did that made you so upset never really happened. It's all just appearance. It's appearance of separation. It's appearance of two people angry at each other. It's all just appearance. If you can allow yourself to go down into that level of oneness, then true forgiveness sees that oneness. It goes past the appearance of separation and sees oneness. And when you see that there's nothing outside of you that isn't you on a deep fundamental level, then what is there to forgive? And that's the key. True forgiveness recognizes there's nothing to forgive. And so when I say don't wait to love. And don't wait to see that underlying oneness when you realize there's nothing to forgive. I get it. They behaved in the way that they did because they didn't know any better. And I'll forgive because there's only one of us here.
That's pretty deep for a lot of people.
Yeah.
It's really difficult to move beyond some of these grievances, particularly if they've been going on for a long time or if it seemed like it was very personal. But you're absolutely right. I mean, that is ultimately the spiritual path is what should lead us to that ultimate conclusion. Now, I would love for you to tell the story about the Chinese gentleman who had cut off his daughters. Do you remember that story?
I do,
I
Mr.
think it
Lee,
was
right?
also in Tucson. Yeah.
It was in Tucson. Yeah, I'd be happy to. Could I just say one thing, too, about what we had just shared? It just occurred to me.
Sure. Uh-huh.
One of the most common pushbacks I get, and now it happens so often that I feel like I need to make a point to say this. When I say forgive someone, or when the wisdom traditions of the world say to forgive one another, they are not saying that you should condone the behavior of someone who's abused you. They are not saying that something wrong that happened, like legitimate abuse and bad action, is okay. And if something or someone is actively abusing you, forgiveness doesn't mean you're a doormat and letting someone walk over you. Sometimes the expression of love can be a firm, no, this is not okay. Or you tell someone that this activity is happening and it's not all right. If in the case of domestic abuse or malpractice in the hospital where I work, if I'm seeing someone doing something unprofessional, I will tell them and I will tell the relevant authorities. Love can look like that. That can be an expression of love. But what forgiveness is, it's an internal shift in perspective. It has nothing to do with what's happening externally in terms of your behavior. It's a shift in perspective. And ultimately, this is probably the biggest point. Forgiveness is a gift you're giving yourself. You are letting go of the burden of judging someone else. And believe me, I'm not a saint by any means. I still get frustrated and triggered by people, but I know that when I'm angry at someone, I've built a prison around myself. I'm putting prison bars around me. I feel the pain and the suffering of being angry at someone. When I can go to that place of forgiveness, I'm freeing myself from that prison. It's for me. I'm forgiving someone else for me. And that's the key. I think it's really important to share. I just want to share that before we go into
no, I think it's really important because to me, the visual is when you're holding resentments, it's like carrying a big bag of trash that's very, very heavy
Yes.
on your back, and you're walking around with this big burden now, or you have weights on your shoes or something. That's what all of the holding of resentments and anger is. It affects us. And so forgiveness is like taking off those boots, dropping the trash bag, and being able to move freely. And I agree, it's not really a judgment of morality, like everything you did was okay. It's
Right.
just a release of the burden. Yeah. And it's very important. And to segue again, because I imagine on the deathbed or when people are facing serious disease or death, that this comes up, the burden that they're carrying, the
Yeah,
resentments, the
exactly.
anger, the cutting off a family, those kinds of things are what really come up. And like, this is your chance in this lifetime to release all of that and free yourself. And I'm sure then there's a much easier death process for you too.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And maybe that's the perfect segue to the story.
Yeah.
One of the patients I took care of when I was in Arizona, he was an elderly and Chinese gentleman who had a lung disease. Uh, he came in very short of breath. We took his blood gas levels and we realized his carbon dioxide levels were very high, his oxygen levels were very low. And after doing a couple of pictures of his chest, we realized this was end stage. He was in an end stage respiratory disease and he had hours. And if we intubated him, which is to say we put a tube down his throat and hook him up to life support, he might have several more days, but really he was going soon. Now, while he had this mask on, he kept saying the names of his daughters over and over again. Our case manager did such a good job at hunting them down. And fortunately, they were just 2 hours away in Phoenix, 2 hours north of Tucson, where I was at the time. And we were able to let them know, hey, your father's here. Now, a little bit of background. We found this out later on, but apparently this gentleman, Mr. Lee, he grew up and raised his daughters in China. And if it's hard to really convey the challenge of having two daughters in China. Back when they had the one-child policy, everyone wanted a male, to continue the lineage, and to have a daughter. I mean, it's really terrible to say, but sometimes they would commit infanticide, or they would kill their daughters so that they could have a child that was a boy in order to carry the lineage. He clearly loved his family very much and made the point to even consider moving because he had two daughters at this point. And so he did love his daughters. That's the context of, we take for granted that, okay, someone has two children. In China, it was different. And it means a lot to have two daughters. He wanted his daughters to take over his family business. They refused, and it created a rift in the family. And eventually those two daughters, they said, you're putting so much pressure on us. All you care about is us taking over your family business. We're done. We're done with you. We're done with the family. And they left. They left for America, and they went to Arizona eventually. And they never spoke to their father for decades. They would occasionally connect via their aunt, I believe, but it was like, no, we're never talking to you again. Uh, and in that generation, you did what your parents told you to do, and for the daughter to not only say no, but then to leave and never talk, it was such an insult. It was such an insult. Filial piety and the whole history of Confucianism in China, treating and respecting your elders and your parents was a given. And to not do that, let's just say Mr. Lee was extremely upset when his daughters left, and he decided he would never talk to them again. But eventually he got old enough where he said, no, this is silly. I want to reconnect with them. And he tried to, and they refused. He decided to get as close to them as he could, and he ended up moving to Tucson, getting an apartment, and kept trying to connect with them. They kept saying no, and it took him being on his deathbed for them to say, okay, we'll come. And the case manager was able to let them know, and they said, we'll come. And looking at his arterial blood gas, he was truly hours away from passing away. And I didn't even know if the 2-hour drive would be enough for them to make it. But they did. They made it in time. We brought them, we rushed them to his bed. He refused the intubation. He refused getting hooked up to life support because it meant he couldn't talk. He just wanted to see them. Now, he seemed like he had slipped into a coma because his carbon dioxide levels were so high. But when they both came into his room, he perked up and he opened his eyes, and he had this beautiful smile on his face. And they immediately started crying. It was so intense. Just the tears flowed. And it's so strange. I was looking at these daughters, and the case manager told me what the background was after the daughters had explained everything. When they saw their father, I saw decades of anger and resentment just wash away. It didn't take more than seeing their dad on that gurney for all of that to fall away. And I wonder, why do we wait? Why do we wait to let the resentment fall away? But credit to them, they let it all go. They dropped it all, and they cried, and they told him they loved him, and they said, I'm so sorry. And you could just see all of it. They were catching up. They were sharing rapidly everything that had happened in the last 20 years, and the child that they had, and they wanting him to see the child, and all the life that he had missed because of them not, of the resentment. And it was just so wonderful. And it was so cute to see the father. He didn't say very much, but he would nod his head, and like, yes, I know, how wonderful. He just wanted his daughters to know that he loved them, and that they loved him. It was so touching. It's so touching. And when that had all died down and they were still and holding his hands, it's almost like that's all he needed. And he closed his eyes, and it was me, it was the respiratory therapist, the nurse, and the 2 daughters. And we just watched as the oxygen levels went lower and lower and lower. And then his heart rate monitor went to 0. And he died. And his daughters, they say in the Chinese tradition, I think also in the Japanese tradition, most Asian traditions, the deeper you bow, the greater the respect. And so his daughters bowed very, very, very deep as he was lying there, and it just felt natural for us to do the same thing. And so if you can just imagine, we're in this room in the ER, the alarms are going off because his heart rate is 0. His daughters are now bowing deep in front of this man who's now a corpse, and we're bowing. It's sort of like a semicircle around this man. We're all deeply bowing. And the image that I got was when a play ends and the actors come on stage and everyone's clapping and they all bow. And it's like Mr. Lee played his role phenomenally. He did such a good job, and we were all bowing. It was a gracious end to an amazing play. And it made me think of Shakespeare. All the world's a stage. And it was quite touching. And it really made me think about how we respect and celebrate life, and then how we respect and celebrate death. It felt so good to do that, to bow. And I felt we should do this. Maybe not bow, but truly honor and celebrate the life of someone who's passed away in whatever way we feel spontaneously called to. And so that was the story of Mr. Lee. And I'm grateful you
That
asked me to share.
story. I love that story. It really, really touches the heart. There's so much in that. First, like you said, the why do we wait? But I also think there's the divine is there in these brief moments, these openings. It just comes right in, like you said. He kind of rallied. It's like he had. I've seen this happen. I saw it with my own father too when he was dying, and my mother too, where it's like they're kind of like out of it, but then in a moment they rally and are able to listen and hear and talk back. And what a gift that was for him, to have that
Yeah.
to me, the divine light come through, so he could be there and hear everything that the girls had to say, even though he couldn't necessarily participate. So to me, that's such a divine gift. And I think there's so much that happens around death that we don't really acknowledge or see. But I also just love the idea of, our culture is so free of ritual and an honoring of rites of passage. And
Mhm.
death is something that our culture's so about youth. And my
Yes, it's
Facebook
true.
feed is so full of, how to how to fix your wrinkles and how to get your skin right and how to look young again,
Yeah.
as if that's the thing. So this rite of passage called death, that it's something that we so ignore, we so put it off, we so don't want to ever think about it. Since I've had a good amount of death happen to me in the last 5 years, I'm very aware of it. Every day I think about it. Every
Yeah.
day I think about it because I also know this might be my last day, and I
Yeah.
think that's probably a good way to live. This is our last day. What would I do today? But you see so much of this in your job, and I've never seen a doctor like you. I mentioned to you before we started recording, I did interview a wonderful spiritually centered end-of-life doctor last year, but I haven't had this experience where doctors sit by the bed and really talk to you. And to me, that is your job. That
Yeah.
is your job, to hold all of it. And, I
Yeah.
just really honor you for doing that.
Well, thank you. Thank you. Yeah. One of my patients, actually, I wrote about him in the introduction. He said you'd make a good priest. And I
Yeah.
always thought that was a great compliment. Just the idea that I think a lot of physicians, they may not realize, at least critical care physicians, but there are others, many physicians don't realize that they play a role in a major transition in life. And sometimes the OB-GYNs who help to deliver babies, that's a huge transition in life.
Huge. Yeah.
Yeah, and these are moments in life that in the past, in the days of mythology, the days of old, these would be landmark mythological days. These were rites of passage that had tremendous symbolism and ritual. And like you said, we've sort of divorced ourselves from that. But the physician plays a huge role in bringing these rites of passage into our daily experience.
I mean, I would call it a midwife role, that kind of, I know that
Yes.
doctors don't like to think of themselves as midwives, and I think you've kind of replaced the midwives, but there's something about the midwife that is the carrier of the energy of what's
Yes.
happening here. So it is kind of a priest and medical, everything, but the
Yeah.
holding of the sacredness of this space. I was not there when my father passed. I was unfortunately not far, but they didn't call me. But the point is the woman who did sit with him, she was a caregiver. She talked to me about how the whole room felt like light, filled with light. And it was just the most
Yeah.
spiritual experience that she had had. My little ego was like, well, why wasn't I there? I did, but
Yeah.
I had to settle into she was the person for him. And it was a beautiful experience and for her, and she was there to witness it and to contain it. And there's a magical thing that happens that so many of us just close the door and go, okay, I'm sure as a doctor, well, another person died, another person died.
Yeah.
There would be kind of a numbing to it. But it seems like you don't really numb yourself to it.
No, it's true though. I recall in medical school, I was told you have to get over it. Because one a death really affected me when I was younger, during medical school, and I was just told, no, this happens. Just get over it. You'll get used to it.
Yeah.
And that's sort of how things are taught. Not always. It's starting to shift a little bit. We're embracing, as a medical culture, the sacredness of death. A moment of silence is done far more often now after someone passes away. Nurses, physicians, caregivers around will take a moment of silence to honor the patient. That happens a lot more often now, and I think it's our way of sort of bringing the sacred without the religious, without dogma. And I'm happy to see that that's sort of moving that tradition, but there is sort of a dearth of the mythological, of the sacred in these passings. And the other thing too that I'd share is death is a calling for spiritual growth. And I say this not as a religious, not from a religious perspective, but what the core of what makes us a human being. Contemplating death is so powerful because it helps you face what is unreal and valueless in your life. And it gives you the opportunity to drop that and to embrace what really matters. One of the reasons I wrote this book is because I felt like death and disease as well, when we face the challenge of disease, these are invitations to spiritual and personal growth. That's what it is. A lot of people, when they get diagnosed with a disease, it's sort of like an annoyance. Like, oh gosh, I can't believe I have to deal with this. I have to go see the doctor for that. It's like in their mind, all they want to do is go back to living life the way they were, and that this disease that they're facing is sort of like an annoyance, like an impedance on being able to live life. When really, death and disease, these are doorways. You have to walk through them and you will be transformed in the process. You can't turn away and just be like, let me get rid of this. Let me just take some pills and get back to the way I was living life. Even a common cold, and I'm just kind of getting over a cold. Even a cold will shift the dynamics in your household. It will be an invitation for you to slow down and take a look at life, because you're sort of forced to stay at home sometimes, or sleep extra, or maybe not push your body as much. All of those things are little moments of invitation. That's what disease and death can do. We just invite us to sort of transform a little bit. It's a gift, really.
I completely agree. And I'm really interested in how that message lands on some of your patients.
Yeah, I never bring it up unless I feel that there's an opening. I
Okay.
really, I'm cautious about. I'm not proselytizing.
Right.
I hope you can get this from my personality already. I am not one to push things onto anyone. Sometimes the only conversation I will have with someone who's maybe facing a major disease, or maybe even death, is, how are you doing today? Did you get some sleep last night? And that will be the only thing we talk about. And that's all that's necessary. It's just showing that you care a little bit and showing that you love. I had a patient just a few weeks ago, prior to Christmas, who came in because he was having an arrhythmia. This is an irregular heart rhythm, and had stroke-like symptoms. And so I talked to him. I was like, well, we don't really know what's going on, but your heart's doing something funny, and we think you might have had a stroke, but let's let's look into it. And his wife was there, and they were like, well, we have a flight we have to catch to go to visit our family abroad. And I was like, well, he's pretty sick right now. I don't think you're going to be able to make your flight. And she's like, well, can you just hurry up with the tests and so that we can, reschedule the flight for another day? And I said, okay, we'll do our best. I came back the next day when the wife wasn't there, and I told him, tell me what's, and this question often opens the door a lot. I asked him, what else is going on with your life at home? What were you doing when all of it when these symptoms happened? What's life like? Just something to that effect. And they start telling me about the stress. And in this patient's case, he said, I retired a year ago, and I just really don't know what I'm supposed to be doing, and I don't have a purpose anymore. And I wish I could help my wife around the house, but I get so tired, and my legs hurt, and my back hurts, and I just feel like I'm not who I used to be. And then he starts crying, and I thought, okay, there's a breakthrough here. He's crying. There's something here. And he says, this is my fault. And I said, what do you mean by that? He's like, I took a whole bottle of Benadryl and Tylenol, and I threw the bottle over the fence of our yard. My wife doesn't know. Don't tell her. And I said, oh, that's why you had these symptoms. That's why your heart's acting all funny. This is why your body is acting like something strange, and why our tests are coming out negative. It's because you tried to commit suicide. And I said, why'd you do that? He's like, I'm just done. I'm done. There's nothing I can offer anymore. I retired, and I'm a useless sack of bones, is what he said. And so we had a long conversation about that. And this was the day before Christmas. And I ended up writing an article on my Substack about how not everyone's Christmas is the same. Not all of us get to spend Christmas at a fireplace opening presents with their loved ones. Some of us are spending Christmas in the hospital because something is going wrong at home. And it's important for us to have compassion for ourselves if we're one of those who are having a atypical Christmas, but compassion for others as well. Needless to say, he got care. We got him psychiatric help, and we had a long conversation with his daughter and his wife, and they canceled their trip, and they realized his health was way more important than their plans. And that's the gift of disease and potential death, is if you embrace it as something's not working. So let's look at what's happening right now, and let's transform ourselves. And spiritual doesn't mean it's not religious. Spiritual just means you're diving into the core of what it means to be human, and you're learning to love deeper and greater.
Absolutely. I completely get that. So disease is like this big red flag that comes up, like you're driving down the road, this big red flag or a whole bunch of red flags. And all we want to do is just go right through it.
Yeah.
We want to go right through it, stay on the road and just knock all those red flags out. Let me stay on the road.
It's a great analogy.
It's so indicative of our culture that's very much go, go, go. And the value is in what I do and how I look and where I go. And it is interesting that we look at disease as a nuisance rather than a door or something that's reflecting back to us. I know back in the day when I overworked, I used to work like 80 hours a week, and I wouldn't stop, but my body would stop me. There'd be times where my body would just pick me up and slap me down, and I would have like a flu or something like that, just something that kept me in bed for a week because I needed to rest, because I didn't rest,
Yeah.
So it was like, duh, my body was really intelligent, and it was telling me what it needed. But we as a culture, we want the pill, we want the shot, we want the something to get us back up like the ever ready bunny. Keep going.
To get on with it. Yes,
Yeah, to
exactly.
get on with it. Yeah.
You nailed it.
Yeah. And I know in your book you also talk about how dis-ease is also your emotional body telling you something about something that you haven't handled or something like that, like the different organs that can be affected, there is an emotional component to it. I think you wrote about
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't word it in that exact way, but I think you got the gist of it, which is that the body is deeply symbolic.
Yeah. Okay.
And um, the body, now this goes to the hard problem of consciousness. Does consciousness exist independent of the body, or is consciousness a byproduct of the body, of the neurons firing? I'm of the camp that consciousness exists independent of the body. If you haven't gotten that already, many scientists and doctors would disagree with that. Just to put that out there. But if you take on the fact that, not the fact, but if you take on the perspective that consciousness exists independent of the body, that all there is mind, is probably another way of putting it, the body then exists inside of that. And the mind communicates via symbolism. And all you have to do is just consider your dreams at night. You have all sorts of stories that happen when you dream at night. The world that you see in your dreams, you think is real when you're there. You think that your dream is real, and then you wake up and you realize, oh, none of that was real. Not only was it not real, but it all exists inside of my own mind. Who's to say this world isn't the same? And if you take that on, and this is sort of a radical perspective, the body and the way that the body shows up for you then becomes deeply symbolic. And I personally think the way that the body gets sick should be looked at. It has meaning. It's not haphazard. It's not random. There is meaning to the way the body breaks down when it does. And it's a clue as to what part of the mind is calling for help and is calling for love. There's tremendous symbolism. And I share some stories, and there's many, many more. In fact, there's a second book that I'm working on, which is just on this topic of how to embrace the symbolism of disease to grow spiritually. But to answer your question, yes, I think the body and the way that the body shows up when there's disease is deeply symbolic, and it's a clue to how we can grow.
I love it. It's a little clue, and we can either take advantage of the clue and learn something from it and grow from it, or just ignore it and wait till something happens to us again. We have the opportunity. So I love the free will aspect of it.
Yeah.
So, well, Adam, we're coming to a close, but I don't want to close without asking you about how does A Course in Miracles influence your life and your profession?
Yes. Well, that's probably a long...
It's probably a podcast in itself.
It's probably an episode in itself. But A Course in Miracles, for me, ended up being one of the most helpful spiritual traditions. And fundamentally, one of the basic teachings of A Course in Miracles is that everything, at every given moment, you have a choice. And the choice is either love or fear. And that when someone is attacking you or you're attacking yourself, that is a call for love. And I really like that perspective because it really simplifies life. When something terrible is happening, it's a call for love. So everything is either a call for love or an expression of love. And the great thing is, when someone expresses love to you, you express love back. When someone is calling for love, aka attacking you, yelling at you, judging you, blaming you, undermining you, whatever that is, the appropriate response to a call for love is to love. And it's a powerful reframing, because our natural tendency is to attack back. And I often have to remind myself, okay, just let's pause for a moment. Let's just stop. Let me not play out thousands of years of human history where we just attack each other ad infinitum. But let me just pause for a moment and realize, oh, this is a call for love on their part. So let me respond with love. And remember, that's not saying you're a doormat or letting things, not condoning negative actions. It's loving here. It's your attitude, how you see the person. Do you see them as truly guilty, or do you see them as innocent? For me, A Course in Miracles has taught me the importance of mind training. And this is a concept I think not a lot of Westerners maybe have heard, but it's quite detailed in the East, in Buddhism and various paths of Hinduism, Taoism, Zen. There's a huge emphasis on mind training. Because the thing is, our mind is operating on autopilot. We immediately assign meaning to the things that happen to us in our lives. When we get a promotion, or we get fired, or our wife tells us that they're upset with us, or we get into an argument, or someone cuts us off in traffic, none of those events have any inherent meaning, but we assign meaning to them. And what A Course and other traditions that teach mind training does is it gets in between that gap, the gap that Viktor Frankl talked about. Between the gap of stimulus and response, there's a space. And in that space lies your freedom. That's what Viktor Frankl said. Course in Miracles, Buddhism, many other traditions talk about that gap. Mind training is you get inside that gap, you pause, and you realize, okay, I have a choice in this moment. Am I going to respond in fear? And the mindset and the belief system of fear, which says that everyone is separate from you and it's dog eat dog, and you gotta be the one that survives, and that means tearing others down. That's the mindset and the belief system of fear. Or am I going to choose to see the world through the mindset and belief system of love, which says there's only one. We're all one. And so naturally, if we're one, what would it do for me to attack myself out there? Nothing. And so let me love. Let me have compassion. Let me be quick to forgive and slow to anger. That's what the thought system of love would say. And that's what A Course in Miracle has done for me. And I say this with the caveat that I'm not saying everyone needs to follow this path. It was helpful for me. There are many other paths out there that teach similar things. So listen to what feels right for you. But the teaching of love and fear, I think, can be applied to almost any tradition.
Definitely, definitely. Those are the two realities we choose in every moment, for sure. Yeah, yeah. I found the Course in Miracles back in, I don't know, 1995, maybe 94. I can't remember, but I just read it by myself. Did you read it by yourself, or did you go to
I
a group
did.
or something?
Yeah.
Yeah,
No,
me
I didn't have
too.
a group.
I
Yeah.
didn't either. I just commuted from my home to downtown Houston on my job at the time, and I just read it all the way there, read it all the way back, read it all the way there, read it all the way back. And the course, the book for students, the book for teachers, and it really, really shifted my perception of the world. And I've got to pick it up again. You've inspired me.
Yes, it's so powerful. Well, it is a self-study course. It says so right at the
It
beginning. So
is.
this is a self-study
Yeah.
course.
It is. I just remember when I found it on the lowest shelf of a bookstore. And I had read Return to Love by Marianne Williamson, where she talked about it. And I thought, oh my gosh, look at this, A Course in Miracles. What is it? I don't even know what she's talking about in this book. And I found this, and I'm thinking, this looks like something like people in California would be doing. That's what I thought.
That's so funny.
I'm like, I'm here
That's so
in
funny.
Houston, Texas. I feel like I'm probably the only person reading something like this. But then I did find out there are groups out there, and but it was
Yeah.
it was a self-study for me, and it really is an amazing experience. But I agree with you; it's not everyone's path.
Yeah. Well, I'll show one other thing about it that is very unique. There are traditions that talk about developing more and more positive qualities, trying to become more loving, to become more peaceful. They will use affirmations. It's sort of like and then you learn more. Those traditions are sort of acquisitive traditions. You gain positive qualities. The unique thing about A Course in Miracles is it has a different approach. A Course in Miracles says your journey, the spiritual journey, is removing the layers, removing the barriers. Specifically, near the introduction, it says this is a course about removing the barriers to the awareness of love's presence. And I really like that, because essentially what it's saying is you are love. That is the nature of who you are, but it's been covered up by false beliefs. And the process of forgiving others, letting them go, seeing to the truth of their nature and your nature, is slowly peeling away those layers of falsehood until you arrive at what you've always been all along. And I think I really like that approach, because it tells me I've always been perfect, I've always been whole, I've always been one, and I just need to remember that.
Well, that's the spiritual path, I think. That's what it is
Yes.
to me. That's what it is. It's really getting down to the essence of who you are, and it is love, and you are perfect and whole. And what a lovely way to end our really great conversation, Adam. This has
Yes.
been
Thank you,
really
Reverend
interesting.
Carol. It's
Yeah.
been such a joy being on this.
Yeah, I really appreciate. I mean, I feel like figuring out a way I could get out to your ICU when it's time for me to die.
That's nice of you. I'll tell you, you will be guided to be right where you need to be in that
Of
moment.
course. Of course. That's my ego trying to plan it all.
Yeah, and who knows? I
Okay.
might go before you. We don't know with death,
We don't know. We don't know. I've seen that happen. Yes. So thank you so much for being a guest on the Spiritual Forum podcast. I will have all of your links to all of your work and your really fabulous book on the show notes. And maybe we'll have you back to talk more about the Course in Miracles.
That'd be lovely. It'd be my honor. Thank you, Reverend Carol.
Okay. Thank you, everyone, for listening. And I now close the Spiritual Forum. Thanks for listening. If you like what you've heard here, hit the subscribe button, leave a comment, or a rating and review on Apple Podcasts. You can also sign up for my weekly newsletter or make a donation to support this work at thespiritualforum.org. Tune in every week, and remember, you are a divine creation, perfect and whole, just as you are.